In the sun-scorched hills of Arizona's Sonoran desert, James Reeves tends to his sprawling farmland with the methodical precision of a man who has spent more than just years mastering agriculture. To his neighbors in the quiet farming community of Sierra Vista, he's simply the retired Army Ranger who found peace in working the land, living contentedly with his 3 German shepherds. What the Sinaloa Cartel's local branch is about to discover, however, is that these aren't just ordinary farm dogs. They're highly trained former military K9 units, and Reeves has prepared them for far more than just herding livestock. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The October wind stirs dust clouds across the vast farmland as James completes his morning equipment check. His movements deliberate and purposeful. The 3 German shepherds, Shadow, Rex, and Delta, maintain their positions at strategic points around the property, their alert postures betraying their military training. To any casual observer, they appear to be typical farm dogs, watching over their territory, but their eyes constantly scan the perimeter, their behavior reflecting years of specialized combat training. James notes the fresh tire tracks near his eastern fence line, their depth and pattern suggesting heavy vehicles had passed through recently. The marks are too deep for local farm trucks, and their positioning indicates a deliberate attempt to assess the property's access points. His military instincts, honed through multiple combat deployments, recognize the telltale signs of surveillance. Inside, the farmhouse, a wall of photographs, tells the story of his service. James, with his K9 unit in Afghanistan, training certificates from the military working dog program, medals earned in joint operations with K9 teams. But it's the more recent images that reveal his true passion: rehabilitation of retired military dogs, giving them new purpose while maintaining their specialized skills. The 3 shepherds currently under his care weren't just any military K9s. They were elite units, trained in everything from threat detection to tactical response. The cartel's presence in Sierra Vista had grown steadily over the past year, their operation disguised as legitimate agricultural business ventures. At first, they maintained a low profile, buying struggling farms and establishing distribution routes. But recently, their tactics had become more aggressive, targeting specific properties with valuable equipment and strategic locations. James had recognized their pattern long before local law enforcement acknowledged the threat. Through his kitchen window, James observes a black SUV moving slowly along the main road, its tinted windows and careful pace suggesting more than casual interest. Shadow, positioned near the front gate, shifts his stance slightly, a subtle change that James recognizes from their deployment days. The dog has detected something out of place, a threat that requires attention while maintaining the appearance of routine farm life. Sarah Chen, the local veterinarian and former Army medic, pulls into the driveway, her truck carrying supplies for the monthly checkup of James's shepherds. But her expression carries more than professional concern as she exits her vehicle. "They're moving faster than expected," she reports, accepting the coffee James offers. "Martinez's place got hit last night. All their heavy equipment gone. Police say there's nothing they can do without proof of who took it." James studies his friend's face, noting the tension in her shoulders. "What aren't you telling me, Sarah?" The veterinarian's hands tremble slightly as she sets down her coffee cup. "They're not just stealing equipment anymore. They're using intimidation, threats, Old man Rodriguez tried to install security cameras after they scoped out his property. Next day, his grandson's car got run off the road. Sheriff Dawson claims there's no connection, says it was just an accident. Through the window, James watches Rex alert to movement along the property's southern border. The shepherd's ears prick forward, body language signaling the presence of observers while maintaining a casual appearance. James had spent years training these dogs to balance threat response with tactical deception, making them appear as ordinary farm animals while maintaining full combat awareness. They're getting bolder, James observes quietly, remembering his final deployment where similar patterns of escalation preceded major criminal operations. The equipment thefts, the intimidation, they're establishing control over the area. But why this region specifically? Why these farms? Sarah's response is interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. Two pickup trucks pass the farm entrance, their occupants conducting what appears to be casual observation. But James notes their professional positioning, the way they maintain specific distances and sight lines. These aren't local farmhands. Their movement patterns suggest military or law enforcement background, cartel enforcers with formal training. James, Sarah says softly, watching the dogs respond to the potential threat with practiced restraint. Remember that training facility you helped set up? The one for rehabilitating military K9s? She meets his gaze, understanding dawning in her eyes. I think it's time to put those protocols to use. The afternoon sun casts long shadows across the farm as James reviews his security footage. Cameras disguised as routine agricultural sensors capturing the increasing cartel activity around his property. The three shepherds maintain their patrol patterns, their behavior appearing random to untrained observers, but following carefully planned security protocols. Each dog's position provides optimal coverage of potential approach routes. Their training, allowing them to distinguish between routine farm visitors and potential threats. Through his surveillance system, James observes more cartel vehicles conducting reconnaissance of neighboring properties. Their operation is professional, methodical, suggesting this isn't just about stealing farm equipment. They're preparing for something bigger, something that requires control of specific properties in this region. The question is why and what makes his farm so important to their plans. Inside his barn, James opens a hidden compartment revealing specialized equipment from his military days. Training logs detail each dog's capabilities, their combat certifications, their specific roles. In tactical operations, Shadow, the oldest, specialized in threat detection and perimeter security. Rex excelled in direct response and apprehension. Delta, the youngest, was an expert in stealth and tactical support. Together, they formed a comprehensive security team, disguised as ordinary farm dogs. Sarah's truck engine growls in the distance, drawing James's attention to the western access road. Through his spotting scope, he observes urgency in her approach. Even from this distance, he can see she's not alone. Martin Rodriguez, the grandson whose car was targeted, sits in her passenger seat. James signals the dogs to maintain their positions while adjusting their alert status, a series of subtle hand commands that prepare them for potential threat response while maintaining their farm dog appearance. "They're moving faster than we thought," Sarah announces as she exits her truck, her medical bag clutching tightly. Rodriguez Farms, the Chen property, Old McDonald's place, all hit in the last 24 hours. They're not just taking equipment anymore, they're forcing people to sign over property rights. Those who resist. She glances at Martin, whose bruised face tells its own story. James studies the young man's expression, noting the mix of fear and determination. "Tell me exactly what happened," he says, leading them into the barn where the dogs maintain protective positions while appearing. To rest casually, Martin's hands tremble slightly as he accepts the water James offers. "They came last night, 6 men, all with military or police training. You could tell by how they moved. Said our farm was now part of their agricultural cooperative. When my grandfather refused," he touches his bruised ribs gingerly. Who said next time they wouldn't be so gentle. Sheriff Dawson just stood there, claimed he didn't see anything wrong with a legitimate business transaction." Through the barn's windows, James spots 2 more cartel vehicles passing his property, their formation suggesting preparation for a larger operation. The dogs respond to his subtle hand signals, adjusting their positions to maintain optimal coverage, while appearing to simply follow their master's routine commands. Years of military training had taught both Handler and K9s the importance of appearing unremarkable while maintaining full tactical readiness. "Sarah," James says quietly, watching the vehicles disappear around the bend, "remember that storage unit we never talk about? The one with all the specialized K9 training equipment?" He meets his friend's understanding gaze. "I think it's time to remind these people why military working dogs are considered force multipliers in combat zones." The setting sun paints the Arizona sky in shades of crimson as James reviews his tactical options, the 3 shepherds maintaining their guard positions with professional precision. Through his surveillance system, he observes increased cartel activity around his property, their movements suggesting they're preparing for what they expect to be a routine equipment theft and intimidation operation. Instead, they're about to learn why some of America's most elite military K9s now guard a seemingly ordinary farm, and why their handler spent years preparing them for threats that don't always come from foreign battlefields. In his study, James opens a hidden safe behind his service photographs, revealing detailed tactical plans and training protocols. As a K9 handler in special operations, he had anticipated that his expertise might one day be needed for more than just training retired military dogs. The 3 shepherds currently under his care weren't just rehabilitation cases. They were carefully selected for their specific capabilities, their training maintained and enhanced for exactly this type of situation. Through the window, he watches Shadow adjust position slightly, the dog's body language signaling detection of surveillance, while maintaining a casual farm dog appearance. The cartel's enforcers, despite their professional training, haven't recognized the tactical assets hidden in plain sight. They see only what they expect to see, an isolated farmer with some well-behaved German shepherds, unaware that they're about to confront one of the most sophisticated K9 security teams ever deployed in a civilian setting. Through the morning mist, James observes another cartel vehicle conducting surveillance, their black SUV moving with practiced precision along his eastern perimeter. Shadow and Rex maintain their positions, their alert postures masked by seemingly casual farm dog behavior. The cartel's presence has grown more overt, their tactics shifting from subtle observation to open intimidation. But they haven't noticed how the shepherds respond to their presence, how each dog adjusts position to maintain optimal coverage while appearing to simply follow routine patterns. Sarah's truck approaches through the back access road, her arrival prompting Delta to shift slightly, acknowledging a known ally while maintaining perimeter security. Through his spotting scope, James notes additional bruising on her face, evidence of an encounter she hasn't yet mentioned. The veterinarian's usual confident stride carries tension as she approaches the farmhouse. They came to the clinic last night, Sarah reports without preamble, accepting the coffee James offers. Said they needed space for their agricultural support services. When I refused, she touches her bruised cheek gently. But that's not why I'm here. While they were threatening me, I saw something in their vehicles. Specialized equipment, the kind used for major trafficking operations. And one of them, the way he moved, talked. He knew things about your last deployment that weren't in any public record. The revelation settles like ice in James's stomach. His final mission with the K9 units had been classified, its details hidden behind redacted documents and official silence. The only information released publicly was that his team had uncovered a significant smuggling operation, leading to the largest drug bust in recent military history. But the complete story, how his dogs had detected not just drugs but evidence of corruption within certain private security contractors, remained classified. Through his security cameras, James spots 3 cartel vehicles parked at strategic points around his property. Their positioning suggests military training, establishing clear fields of fire while maintaining communication lines. They're not just here for the equipment, he concludes, watching Shadow react to the new threat positions with subtle shifts. In patrol pattern, they're eliminating potential witnesses, anyone who might recognize their operation methods. Sarah pulls out her tablet, displaying satellite images of regional property acquisitions. Look at the pattern. Every farm they've targeted, every piece of land they've seized, they all connect to former military personnel. But not just any veterans. Her finger traces a route through the properties. They're specifically targeting locations owned by people who served in counter-narcotics operations. James studies the map, his tactical training recognizing the strategic value of these positions. The cartel isn't just stealing equipment or intimidating farmers. They're systematically securing a transportation corridor, using legitimate agricultural operations as cover for something much larger. Through his window, he watches Rex alert to movement near the barn, the shepherd's body language signaling detection of surveillance while maintaining a casual appearance. Sarah, James speaks quietly, his eyes tracking the cartel observers. That storage unit I mentioned, Unit 4521, at Desert Storage. Inside, you'll find a laptop. Bring it here, but take the back roads and watch for tails. He writes an access code on a slip of paper. If anything happens, if anyone follows you... I remember the protocols, Sarah interrupts, her military training evident in her precise nod. Just like the old days in Afghanistan. Maintain cover, avoid pattern recognition, report any surveillance. She glances at the dogs, their alert postures masked by seemingly routine farm behavior. They have no idea what they're really dealing with, do they? As Sarah departs, James begins his morning farm work. Each movement carefully calculated to appear routine while allowing him to assess the cartel's positions. The 3 shepherds maintain their patrol patterns, their military training allowing them to process multiple threat indicators while appearing to simply follow their master. Through carefully placed mirrors and strategic positioning, he catalogues the cartel's rotations, their communication methods, the way they utilize hand signals that confirm his suspicions about their professional training. His phone buzzes with a text from Martin Rodriguez. 3 more farms sold this morning. Johnson's Place, Miller Family Farm, Old Thompson property. They're closing in. James sends a coded acknowledgement, another protocol established during his military days. He thinks about the families being forced out, generations of farmers who'd weathered every hardship except this kind of calculated intimidation. A black SUV approaches the farm, different from the usual surveillance vehicles. Through his spotting scope, James observes 4 men in tactical clothing emerge, their movement disciplined and coordinated. Their leader pauses to speak with the perimeter. Observers, and even from this distance, James recognizes the cold efficiency in his bearing. These aren't just cartel enforcers. They're trained operators using their skills for criminal enterprises. Inside the barn, James accesses a secure satellite phone hidden behind agricultural equipment. He enters a memorized number, one of many contingency plans established during his service. Authentication code Sierra 9, he speaks quietly when the line connects. Need background check on cartel activities in Sierra Vista region. Priority focus on personnel with military or law enforcement training. Special attention to connections with Operation Sandstorm. The response comes immediately, professional and direct. Confirmed. Data incoming. Be advised, multiple red flags on recent cartel expansion. Similar patterns detected in 3 other locations, all centered on properties connected to military K9 operations. James ends the call, mind processing implications. The cartel isn't just trying to seize his farm. They're systematically targeting locations connected to military working dog programs. The question is why, and what does it have to do with his last deployment? Through his surveillance system, James watches the cartel's tactical team establish positions around his property. Their deployment pattern suggests preparation for a major operation, not just the usual intimidation tactics. Shadow, Rex, and Delta maintain their positions, their military training allowing them to process the increasing threat while appearing as ordinary farm dogs. But James notes the subtle changes in their posture, the way they adjust their patrol patterns to maintain optimal coverage of the new threat positions. The cartel's leader approaches his front gate, projecting casual confidence that masks tactical awareness. "Mr. Reeves," he calls out, his voice carrying practiced authority. "We should discuss your property's future. My associates represent an agricultural investment group interested in expanding local operations." His smile doesn't reach his eyes as he gestures to the tactical team maintaining position. "Perhaps we could talk about a mutually beneficial arrangement." James steps onto his porch, positioning himself to maintain clear sight lines while appearing relaxed. The 3 shepherds adjust their positions automatically, years of training allowing them to establish optimal defensive coverage while seeming to simply follow their master. Through his peripheral vision, he notes how the cartel's tactical team studies his property, their assessment professional but incomplete. They see the obvious, clear fields of fire, potential cover positions, likely security measures. But they haven't recognized the most dangerous assets in plain sight. 3 highly trained military K9s maintaining combat awareness while appearing as ordinary farm dogs. "Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Reeves," the cartel leader continues, his tone suggesting he knows more than public records reveal. "Distinguished service record, specialized experience with military working dogs. Your skills could be valuable. To our organization, we're willing to be very generous." The implied threat in his words carries the weight of recent property seizures and escalating violence. Through his security cameras, James observes more cartel vehicles approaching from multiple directions. Their tactical positioning suggests preparation for a major operation, but their confidence betrays their ignorance. They expect to find a retired veteran they can intimidate or buy off, unaware that James has spent years maintaining not just his own skills, but those of his K9 partners. Each dog's capabilities have been enhanced beyond their original military training, adapted for precisely this type of civilian threat scenario. Sarah's truck appears on the horizon, her return marking another phase in the unfolding situation. Through his spotting scope, James notes fresh damage to her vehicle, suggesting she encountered resistance while retrieving the laptop. The cartel's tactical team shifts position slightly, their movement indicating recognition of potential complications to their planned operation. Consider carefully what happens next, the cartel leader advises, watching Sarah's approach with calculated interest. Your military experience makes you valuable, but it also makes you a potential threat. Sometimes the smart play is knowing when to cooperate. His words carry the weight of recent events, beaten farmers, seized properties, escalating violence against those who resist. Inside his command center, hidden beneath the barn's reinforced floor, James reviews tactical readouts from sensors disguised as agricultural equipment. The cartel's forces have established a professional perimeter, their deployment suggesting extensive military or law enforcement training. But their confidence in superior numbers and tactical advantage has led them to overlook the most crucial element of his defense. 3 elite military K9s maintaining full combat readiness while appearing as simple farm dogs. Through his surveillance network, James watches the situation develop with the patience his military service had instilled. The cartel's tactical team maintains their positions, unaware that every movement is being monitored, not just by cameras, but by highly trained K9 operators processing multiple threat indicators while appearing to simply guard their territory. Years of specialized training have prepared both handler and dogs for exactly this type of confrontation, where the greatest advantage lies not in superior force, but in enemies underestimating their true capabilities. Sarah's truck skids to a stop in the farmyard, dust billowing as the cartel's tactical team adjusts their positions in response. Through his surveillance system, James spots something in her passenger seat, documents, maps, what appears to be photographic evidence. She's found something that's made the cartel break their pattern of gradual intimidation, forcing them to accelerate their timeline. Time to show them why we trained so hard, James whispers to his 3 shepherds, each dog maintaining their positions while processing the escalating threat level. Shadow's ears prick forward slightly, detecting movement patterns that suggest hostile intent, while Rex and Delta adjust their patrol routes to provide optimal coverage of potential attack vectors. The cartel leader's composed expression cracks slightly as Sarah emerges from her truck, clutching a leather portfolio. "Ms. Chen," he calls out, false charm masking growing tension. "I wasn't aware you were involved in Mr. Reeves's business decisions. Our offer extends to your clinic as..." "Well, of course. We take care of those who cooperate with our organization." Inside the farmhouse, Sarah spreads out documents recovered from the laptop, while James maintains surveillance of the increasing cartel presence. "Found these in the encrypted files," she reports, her military training evident in her precise analysis. "Shipping manifests, construction permits, personnel records. They're not just buying properties, they're building something big. James scans the documents while monitoring his security feeds. The paperwork reveals a complex network of shell companies, all leading back to a familiar name, Azteca Private Security Solutions. His breath catches. He recognizes the company from his final deployment. They were the private contractors involved in Operation Sandstorm, the ones whose illegal activities his K9 unit had uncovered. They're creating a corridor, he realizes, studying transportation routes highlighted on the maps, using the farms to connect key access points. The equipment theft, the intimidation, it's all about controlling specific properties. His tactical training kicks in as he processes the implications. They're rebuilding their smuggling network right here in Sierra Vista. Through the window, he spots the cartel leader, Marco El Lobo Ramirez, conferring with his tactical team. Their movements carry military precision despite attempts to appear casual. 2 more SUVs arrive, disgorging men in tactical clothing who take up strategic positions around the property. Their deployment pattern confirms James's analysis. These aren't ordinary criminals, but trained operators executing a planned operation. James, Sarah asks quietly, studying his expression. What else did you find? What made them chase me? The former Army medic pulls a USB drive from her boot. Traffic camera footage from the county line, military trucks, weapon shipments, all using the routes they've been clearing. But that's not what spooked them. Her hands tremble slightly as she inserts the drive into the laptop. This was hidden in an encrypted folder. Security footage from your last deployment, dated the night Operation Sandstorm went down. The screen fills with grainy video showing a familiar compound. James forces himself to watch as the scene unfolds. His K9 unit discovering documents in a secure room. The confrontation with Azteca contractors, the firefight that followed. But the footage continues past what the official report had described, showing his dogs uncovering not just drug shipments, but evidence of deeper corruption. They lied, Sarah whispers, watching the truth of that night finally revealed. The official story was a cover-up. James nods, his voice steady despite the emotions threatening to surface. Operation Sandstorm wasn't just about drugs. My dogs uncovered evidence that Azteca was running weapons through their security contracts, using military supply lines for private smuggling operations. The drug bust was just cover for the real discovery. A motorcycle engine revs outside, demanding attention. Ramirez stands in the driveway, projecting authority that masks predatory intent. Mr. Reeves, his voice carries practiced charm, concealing menace. We need to discuss your property's future and perhaps some other matters that should have died in Operation Sandstorm. James studies his position through carefully placed mirrors, noting how the tactical team has established a professional perimeter. Their deployment is skilled but predictable, exactly the kind of approach his K9 unit had trained to counter. They expect to find a retired veteran, someone they can intimidate into submission. Instead, they're about to learn why military working. Dogs are considered among the most effective force multipliers in modern combat. Sarah, James speaks quietly while maintaining watch on the increasing force outside. Remember the rehabilitation protocols we developed for combat-stressed K9s? The ones that help them readjust to civilian life while maintaining their tactical capabilities? He meets his friend's eyes, seeing understanding dawn. It's time to put those protocols to field use. Through his surveillance network, he observes more cartel forces arriving, trained operators mixed with local muscle, all positioning themselves for what they expect to be a simple intimidation operation. They don't realize they're walking into a trap years in the making, facing opponents whose greatest advantage lies in being underestimated. Shadow, Rex, and Delta maintain their positions, their military training allowing them to process multiple threat indicators while appearing as ordinary farm dogs. Each shepherd's specialized capabilities have been enhanced through years of careful conditioning. Shadow's unmatched detection skills, Rex's direct action expertise, Delta's stealth and tactical support abilities. Together, they form a comprehensive combat team disguised as simple farm animals. Inside his command center, James activates the property's hidden security measures. Cameras concealed in weathered fence posts, motion sensors disguised as irrigation, equipment, surveillance gear that appears to be nothing more than normal farm maintenance, all coming online to provide tactical awareness of the cartel's deployment. They're not just after the farm, Sarah observes, studying satellite imagery of cartel movements across the region. Every property they've seized, every ranch they've taken, they're all connected to veterans who might have known about Operation Sandstorm. They're eliminating potential threats while building their new network. James's tactical display shows increased activity as more cartel vehicles approach from the north. Their formation suggests preparation for a major operation, but their confidence betrays their ignorance of what they're truly facing. Through his surveillance feeds, he watches Ramirez coordinate with his tactical team, their professional movement indicating extensive military training now turned to criminal purpose. "Consider your position carefully, Mr. Reeves," Ramirez calls out, his false charm cracking slightly. "We know about the evidence from Operation Sandstorm. Your dogs may have uncovered our operation there, but this time there's nowhere to run. No backup coming to help. You're alone against superior force." Sarah's phone buzzes with encrypted data from their military contacts. Intel confirmed. Azteca security showing major activity, multiple weapon shipments tracked to Sierra Vista region. High-level personnel mobilizing. You've got their attention. James allows himself a grim smile, remembering his K9 training about the psychology of overconfident opponents. The most dangerous adversaries, he'd learned, are often the ones who think they're in complete control. They follow procedures, deploy tactics that have always worked before. That's when they miss the subtle signs that they're walking into a trap. Outside, Ramirez's voice carries across the farmyard with practiced authority. "Mr. Reeves, my associates are growing impatient. Perhaps we should discuss this situation like reasonable people. After all, we are not the monsters your dogs exposed." This is in Operation Sandstorm. James studies his position through the surveillance system, watching the cartel's tactical team establish what they believe to be complete control of the situation. Their professional training betrays no sign that they were the same contractors his K9 unit had exposed, the ones whose illegal weapons trade had been hidden behind legitimate security operations. But he recognizes the subtle tells of men accustomed to wielding power through fear, men who've forgotten that true strength often comes wrapped in unexpected packages, like 3 German shepherds maintaining combat awareness while appearing as simple farm dogs. Through the surveillance monitors, James watches the cartel's tactical team establish positions around his farm, their confidence masking growing frustration at his continued resistance. His computer alerts him to incoming data, detailed profiles of every operator currently surrounding his property. The files reveal what he suspected, These aren't random criminals or hired muscle, but former military and law enforcement personnel who followed Ramirez into the private sector, trading their oaths for profit. Final warning, Mr. Reeves, Ramirez calls out, his practiced charm cracking under pressure. Don't make us do this the hard way. Operation Sandstorm already showed us how that ends. Through his command center's camera feeds, James observes additional cartel vehicles arriving. Reinforcements called in when their initial intimidation failed. Actually, James responds through the external speakers, watching Shadow, Rex, and Delta maintain their deceptively casual positions. I don't think you understand how this ends at all. With precise keystrokes, he initiates the first phase of his defense protocols. Suddenly, the farm's irrigation systems activate, but not with water. Industrial-grade smoke begins filling strategic areas, disrupting the tactical team's sightlines and forcing them to adjust their positions. Impressive trick, Ramirez comments, forced amusement masking concern. But smoke won't stop what's coming. You're only delaying the inevitable. James maintains his focus on the tactical displays as the cartel forces fall back to predetermined rally points, exactly where he anticipated they would move. No, James responds calmly, watching through thermal imaging as his opponents move precisely where he wants them. I'm teaching you what my K9 unit tried to tell you in Operation Sandstorm, that sometimes the biggest mistake is underestimating what's right in front of you. His fingers dance across the keyboard, activating the next phase. Buried speakers begin broadcasting specific frequencies, the kind that play havoc with tactical radio communications. The coordinated operation begins to fragment as teams lose contact with each other, forced to rely on hand signals and preset protocols. Through his surveillance feeds, James observes the rising frustration in their movements. These men are used to being the predators, used to having superior force and technology on their side. They've forgotten the most important lesson from his military K9 training, that true victory often goes not to the strongest, but to the most prepared. You know what the real legacy of Operation Sandstorm is? James broadcasts, watching Ramirez's composure crack slightly. Not just the evidence we uncovered, not just the networks we exposed. It's about showing others that standing up to people like you isn't about matching your firepower. It's about being smarter, more patient, more committed to what's right. His monitors show more vehicles approaching. Reinforcements Ramirez called in when his initial intimidation failed. But James allows himself a small smile, remembering his K9 training about the power of proper preparation. Because while the cartel's forces focus on surrounding his farm, they haven't noticed the real operation taking place. In the clinic across town, Sarah coordinates with local law enforcement officers who haven't been corrupted, sharing evidence from Operation Sandstorm that exposes the full scope of Azteca's illegal activities. Through secure channels, documentation is already being transmitted to multiple federal agencies. And in secure facilities across the country, people who owe James and his K9 unit their lives are mobilizing. Ramirez thinks he's about to eliminate a loose end from Operation Sandstorm. Instead, he's about to learn why James spent years maintaining his dog's combat capabilities while appearing to simply run a farm. Because sometimes the most dangerous opponent isn't the one with the most weapons or the biggest team. Sometimes it's the quiet one, the patient one, the one who knows that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in standing firm when Everything seems darkest. The command center's monitors cast a blue glow across James's face as he tracks multiple threats converging on his position. Ramirez's reinforcements arrive in waves. 3 tactical teams approaching from the north, 2 more securing the ridge line, while local muscle establishes a tight perimeter around the property. Their coordination would be impressive if it wasn't. Exactly what he had predicted they would do. You're only making this harder on yourself, Reeves. Ramirez's voice carries calculated menace through the speakers. We know about the evidence. We know about the hidden files. Did you really think your K9 unit was the only one who could plan ahead? James studies the thermal imaging displays showing movement patterns around his property. The cartel's teams are indeed establishing a professional perimeter, but their confidence betrays their ignorance. They haven't realized that every German shepherd they dismiss as a simple farm dog is actually a highly trained combat operator, processing multiple threat indicators while maintaining the appearance of routine farm life. His satellite phone lights up with an encrypted message from Sarah. Everyone's safe at the clinic, federal teams moving into position. But James, they're not just looking for Operation Sandstorm evidence. Overheard their radio chatter. They're searching for something called Project Eclipse. The name sends a chill through James's spine. He accesses a hidden partition on his laptop, finding a folder specifically prepared for this contingency. The files reveal the true scope of what his K9 unit had uncovered during Operation Sandstorm. Azteca wasn't just running weapons. They were developing specialized equipment, using their private security contracts as cover for something much darker. Project Eclipse was supposed to die with your dog's discovery, Ramirez broadcasts, his false charm replaced by cold efficiency. Those records, that prototype they found, they're worth more than this whole valley, worth more than all the lives of these farmers you're trying to protect. Through his surveillance network, James observes Ramirez's operators deploying specialized equipment, electronic warfare gear, signal detection systems, the kind of hardware that goes beyond normal private security operations. They're searching for something specific, something they believe his K9 unit had hidden on the property. You know what I learned about men like you during K9 combat training? James responds, his voice carrying the quiet strength developed through years of military service. That you're so focused on having the best weapons, the most advanced technology, that you forget the most powerful weapon is right here. He watches his dogs maintain their positions, their military training, allowing them to process the escalating threat while appearing as simple farm animals. His monitors show Ramirez's teams breaching the outer perimeter, moving with professional precision through areas they believe they control. But James had spent years preparing this property, installing systems that would turn an invader's strength against them. With careful keystrokes, he begins activating those preparations. Suddenly, electronic interference fills key approach routes, disrupting Ramirez's tactical communications. Emergency barriers seal specific sectors, separating his forces into manageable groups. The ventilation system James had modified begins cycling air in carefully calculated patterns, making it impossible to use thermal imaging or advanced sensors effectively. Impressive setup, Ramirez acknowledges, but James detects growing frustration in his tone. Your K9 training served you well, but you're still one man against an army. You can't protect everyone forever. That's where you're wrong, James responds, watching through his cameras as confusion spreads through the enemy ranks. Military working dogs taught me that true strength comes from inspiring others to stand up against people like you. His words prove prophetic as new signals appear on his tactical display. Across Sierra Vista, lights begin flickering on in farmhouses and small businesses. Vehicles start moving along back roads, carrying families and vital supplies to safe locations James had established years ago. The community isn't running in fear. They're executing evacuation plans Sarah had quietly prepared them for. Your men in town might want to stand down, James continues, allowing himself a small smile. These farmers may not be special forces, but they know every inch of this land, and they're done being afraid. Through his monitors, he watches Ramirez's carefully planned operation begin to unravel. His teams in key positions report increasing difficulties as hidden defense mechanisms activate. The sophisticated equipment they brought to locate Project Eclipse's prototype proves useless against the countermeasures James had installed. You're making a mistake, Ramirez warns, but his composure shows cracks. You have no idea what Project Eclipse can do, what kind of power you're playing with. Actually, James responds, accessing another system he had prepared, I know exactly what Project Eclipse is, and more importantly, I know why my K9 unit gave everything to keep it out of your hands. His fingers move across the keyboard with practiced precision, implementing the next phase of his defense plan. Throughout the farm, hidden speakers begin broadcasting a specific frequency, one that perfectly matches the training protocols his K9 unit had developed for combat operations. To the cartel's forces, it seems like ordinary interference, but for Shadow, Rex, and Delta, it's a signal to transition from passive surveillance to active defense posture. Your K9s were just dogs, Ramirez challenges, but uncertainty edges his voice as he watches the shepherd's behavior subtly shift. They may have been military trained, but they're still just animals. James allows himself a grim smile, remembering years of specialized combat training. During Operation Sandstorm, he broadcasts, watching his dogs move with coordinated precision while maintaining their farm dog appearance. You never understood what made military working dogs so effective. It wasn't just about their training or capabilities. It was about their ability to process complex tactical situations while appearing completely non-threatening. Through his surveillance system, James observes Ramirez's tactical teams encountering increasing difficulty. Their sophisticated equipment, designed for conventional security operations, proves less effective against a defense network built around K9 combat tactics. Each time they adjust their approach, the shepherds modify their patrol patterns, maintaining optimal coverage while appearing to simply guard their territory. Sarah's voice comes through the secure channel. Federal Task Force confirms Azteca. Activities at 3 other locations. Similar pattern targeting veteran properties using local corruption for cover. But James, there's more. They found evidence of Project Eclipse testing. Entire communities going dark, their security systems mysteriously failing. They're already using prototype technology. The implications chill James to his core. This isn't just about stolen military hardware. Ramirez's organization is actively deploying experimental weapons, testing their capabilities on innocent communities. Through his monitors, he watches more Azteca reinforcements arrive, not just tactical. Teams now, but specialized technical units carrying equipment he recognizes from Operation Sandstorm. You think you're protecting people, Ramirez broadcasts, his voice carrying cold certainty, but you're just delaying the inevitable. Project Eclipse exists, Someone will deploy it, profit from it. At least we're Americans. Better us than our enemies. That's the difference between you and my K9 unit, James responds, activating another layer of defenses. They understood that some lines shouldn't be crossed, no matter who's doing the crossing. That's why they designed this entire setup, not just to protect the prototype, but to ensure it could never be reproduced. His words are punctuated by new alarms on his tactical display. Ramirez's technical teams have begun scanning the farm with advanced sensors, searching for the quantum signature that would reveal Project Eclipse's location. But James had prepared for this, installing a network of decoys throughout the property. Each one appears identical to the real prototype on their instruments, creating a web of false positives that makes precise location impossible. Clever, Ramirez acknowledges, but we have time and numbers on our side. We'll find it eventually, and all these brave farmers you're trying to protect, their families, their homes, how long can you really keep them safe? James allows himself a small smile, remembering his K9 training about the power of community. I don't have to protect them forever, Ramirez. Just long enough for them to remember who they really are, to remember that tyranny only works when good people choose to stay silent. His monitors show movement throughout the valley. Not retreat, but coordination. Farm trucks position themselves on strategic back roads. Hunting rifles emerge from family gun safes. Farmers and ranchers begin taking up positions they've quietly practiced. This community hasn't just been hiding, they've been preparing. You're not the only one who can build a network, James continues, watching Ramirez's expression change as he notices the shifting tactical situation. Military working dogs taught me something fundamental about protection, that true strength comes from standing together. A new alert flashes on his screen, data from long-range sensors he had placed throughout the region. More Azteca forces are inbound, including heavy transport vehicles carrying what appears to be portable power generation equipment. They're preparing for a major operation, likely planning to deploy Project Eclipse against the entire valley's infrastructure. Final warning, Ramirez announces, all pretense of negotiation gone. Surrender the prototype, or we demonstrate exactly what this technology can do. Your neighbors' farms, their homes, their livelihoods, everything that requires electricity becomes collateral damage. How many lives is your moral stand worth? James's response carries the quiet conviction his military service had nurtured. How many lives is your greed worth, Ramirez? Because you're about to learn what my K9 unit knew, that sometimes the greatest power isn't in the weapons we possess, but in the principles we're willing to defend. As Ramirez's forces position their power generation equipment around the valley, James receives confirmation from his long-range sensors. The technology they're deploying matches Project Eclipse's specifications, each unit capable of generating targeted electromagnetic pulses that could disable electronics within a 2-mile radius. Together, they could effectively shut down the entire valley's power grid, communications, and critical systems. Sarah, James speaks into his secure channel. Status report on the community preparations? Better than we hoped, comes the response. Remember how you insisted every farm install those old diesel generators, the ones not connected to the main power grid? They're all operational. Emergency radio networks active. medical supplies distributed, every family implementing their designated contingency plans. Through his surveillance network, James observes Ramirez's technical teams establishing their attack positions. Their confidence suggests they don't realize he had spent years preparing this community for exactly this type of technological warfare. Every major farm equipped with autonomous power systems, critical infrastructure protected by specialized shielding, emergency communication protocols that don't rely on modern electronics. You seem awfully calm for someone about to watch their neighbors' livelihoods get destroyed. Ramirez's voice carries practiced menace. Last chance to surrender Project Eclipse before we demonstrate its power. James's response reflects the quiet strength his military service had cultivated. You still don't understand what you're really facing, do you? This isn't just about protecting one piece of technology. This is about standing up to people who think their power gives them the right to threaten innocent lives. His monitors show increased activity in the valley as the community's preparation becomes visible. Ranch hands moving livestock to sheltered locations, families activating backup power systems, local hunting groups taking up defensive positions along strategic ridgelines, not as tactical operators, but as people defending their homes with intimate knowledge of every trail and vantage point. They're civilians, Ramirez dismisses, farmers and ranchers playing at being soldiers. They have no idea what they're up against. Actually, James counters, watching his tactical display light up with new signals, they know exactly what they're facing, because I didn't just help them prepare physically, I helped them understand that true courage isn't about having the most advanced weapons. It's about being willing to stand together against those who would rule through fear. The first phase of Ramirez's attack begins as his technical teams activate their disruption devices. Waves of electromagnetic energy pulse through the valley, targeting power distribution systems and communication networks. But instead of the expected chaos, they're met with a coordinated response that clearly catches them off guard. Emergency generators spring to life at key locations, maintaining power to critical infrastructure. Radio operators using hardened equipment coordinate between defensive positions, the community's preparation proving more sophisticated than Ramirez's forces anticipated. Through the early morning light, James watches his K9s respond to increased movement around the farm perimeter. Shadow's ears prick forward slightly, detecting patterns that suggest coordinated assault preparation, while Rex and Delta adjust their positions to maintain optimal defensive coverage. His surveillance feeds show Ramirez's frustration mounting as their initial electromagnetic attack fails to create the expected vulnerability. Impossible, one of Ramirez's technical advisors reports over their compromised channel. They're maintaining operational capability. Someone knew about Project Eclipse's effects, prepared countermeasures. James allows himself a moment of pride in his foresight, remembering the lessons learned during Operation Sandstorm. You're so focused on having the most advanced technology, he broadcasts. You forget that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most effective. That true resilience comes from community, not weaponry. His surveillance feeds show Ramirez's frustration as his initial attack fails to create the expected vulnerability. His force is beginning to reposition as they attempt to adapt to a situation their tactical doctrine hadn't prepared them for. Through his command center's monitors, James observes a significant shift in the operational dynamics. Senior members of Ramirez's forces begin conducting hushed consultations, their body language, suggesting internal conflict between professional duty and personal conviction. These experienced operators study their surroundings with growing uncertainty. Their tactical training now focused on analyzing a different kind of threat. The coordinated response of a community they expected to easily dominate. Your command. Structure is fragmenting, James notes, watching Ramirez's authority continue to erode. These men didn't sign up to threaten innocent communities or protect criminal enterprises. They joined because they believed in serving something greater than themselves. Ramirez's response carries the weight of someone confronting uncomfortable truths. You don't understand the complexities of modern warfare, Reeves. The lines between right and wrong aren't as clear as your K9 unit believed. Sometimes maintaining security requires compromising ideal principles. James accesses another section of his files, finding detailed analyses of how organizations like Azteca systematically corrupt military values. My dogs understood the complexities better than you think, he responds. They saw how gradually it happens, how good soldiers become compromised one small decision at a time until they can't recognize what they've become. His tactical displays show more veterans from the community engaging with Ramirez's operators, each conversation guided by insights James had documented. Former squad leaders discuss unit cohesion and moral leadership. Combat medics share stories about choosing ethical action over expedient solutions. Each interaction reinforces fundamental military values that transcend organizational loyalty. Sarah, James signals through their secure channel implement protocol redemption. Throughout the valley, a new phase of community response activates. Local business owners who had received his guidance begin emerging from secure locations, carrying documented evidence of how Azteca's operations have affected real families. Parents share stories of children threatened. Elderly residents describe psychological intimidation. Farmers detail systematic property destruction, not as accusations, but as reminders of what these operators had originally sworn to prevent. You're not just challenging their current mission, Ramirez observes, watching his force's professional detachment continue to crack. You're making them confront the distance between their original purpose and what they've become. Shadow suddenly alerts to movement along the eastern perimeter, his body language signaling detection of new threats while maintaining his farm dog appearance. Through his surveillance network, James observes 3 heavily armored vehicles approaching, their configuration matching Azteca's elite extraction teams. Ramirez's expression shows recognition as he receives the update through his command channel. Our board of directors is taking a personal interest in this situation, he announces, his tone carrying carefully measured authority. They're not accustomed to resistance, especially from a civilian community. This is your final opportunity to surrender Project Eclipse before they authorize extreme measures. James accesses a hidden partition in his files, finding contingency plans he'd prepared for exactly this scenario. The documents reveal that he had anticipated Azteca's leadership would eventually be forced to show themselves, their personal involvement exposing vulnerabilities that no amount of hired force could protect. Sarah, James signals through the secure channel, activate protocol Daybreak. Throughout the valley, a coordinated sequence begins. Local news vans that had been strategically positioned start broadcasting live feeds. Satellite uplinks James had carefully installed years ago begin transmitting encrypted data to multiple international media outlets. The very arrival of Azteca's leadership becomes their greatest weakness as their supposedly covert operation faces unexpected exposure. You're not just recording their presence, Ramirez realizes, watching his tactical advantage dissolve. You're forcing them into the light, making them personally accountable for what happens here. I understood something fundamental about corrupt power, James responds, monitoring the approaching vehicles through his surveillance network. It depends on shadows, on deniability, on keeping the public from seeing how it really operates. That's why the most effective defense isn't always about matching force with force. His tactical displays show the impact as Azteca's board members begin to grasp their situation. These are not military commanders accustomed to battlefield conditions, but corporate executives who've built their power through boardroom manipulation and plausible deniability. Now they face exposure not just to law enforcement, but to public scrutiny they can't control. Consider carefully what happens next. James broadcasts on all channels. Your presence here transforms this from a covert operation into something the world is watching. Every action you authorize will be documented, every order traced directly to its source. Through his command center, he implements another phase of his strategy. Documentation begins flowing to news outlets and regulatory agencies. Evidence not just of Azteca's criminal activities, but of individual board members' involvement in decisions that led to civilian casualties and illegal weapons sales. Rex and Delta maintain their patrol patterns, their military training allowing them to process the increasing threat while appearing as ordinary farm dogs. But James notes the subtle changes in their posture, the way they adjust their movements to maintain optimal coverage of new threat positions. His K9 unit's combat experience proves invaluable as they help coordinate the community's defense while appearing to simply guard their territory. Your dogs may have exposed us during Operation Sandstorm, one of the board members responds, through their tactical network. But uncertainty edges his voice. But this evidence died with them. Our legal team can handle any accusations. My K9 unit knew they might not survive exposing your operation, James acknowledges, watching more operators study the unfolding situation. That's why they prepared something more powerful than individual testimony. They created a way for truth to emerge that no amount of legal maneuvering can suppress. His monitors show the psychological impact spreading through Azteca's remaining forces as they observe their leaders' confidence beginning to crack. Professional operators trained to follow orders now witness the vulnerability of those who issue those commands. The carefully maintained illusion of righteous authority dissolves as they see the true nature of what they've been protecting. This isn't just about Project Eclipse anymore, Sarah observes through their secure channel. Your K9 unit designed a way to expose not just criminal actions, but the entire system that enables them. James watches through his surveillance network as this revelation transforms the operational dynamics. Operators who remained loyal out of belief in the mission's legitimacy now see clearly who they're really serving: the defense his dogs helped create. Proves more powerful than any weapon because it targets something no amount of tactical training can overcome: the human need to serve a worthy cause. Through his surveillance feed, James watches the cartel's board members engage in increasingly tense discussions inside their armored vehicles. Their sleek business attire and executive demeanor seem increasingly out of place as the situation spirals beyond their corporate control protocols. Shadow's ears prick forward slightly, detecting changes in movement patterns that suggest growing discord among the enemy ranks. "Your position is unsustainable," James broadcasts, his voice carrying quiet authority. "Every minute you remain here, more documentation reaches the public. Financial records showing illegal weapons sales, mission reports detailing civilian casualties, board meeting minutes revealing deliberate targeting of veteran communities. My K9 unit didn't just gather evidence. They created a network for distributing truth that grows stronger the more you try to suppress it." His tactical displays show Ramirez's growing realization as he observes his superior's composure crumbling. "You engineered this," he acknowledges, professional assessment coloring his tone. "Drew them out of their secure positions by making them think personal intervention was necessary. Now their very presence validates everything you're releasing." Through his command center, James initiates another phase of his strategy. Local radio stations begin broadcasting interviews he had recorded with former Azteca operators who had chosen to speak out. Each testimony reveals how the organization systematically corrupts military values, turning legitimate security operations into cover for criminal enterprises. "Your K9s were idealistic," one board member declares, "but his attempt at dismissal lacks conviction. This industry requires pragmatism, understanding that sometimes ethical compromises are necessary for greater security." James counters, activating another system he had prepared. "My dogs understood pragmatism better than you think. They recognized that true security isn't built on corruption and fear. It comes from communities standing together, from warriors remembering their original purpose." Shadow suddenly alerts to movement along the western perimeter, his body language signaling the approach of new threats while maintaining his farm dog appearance. Through thermal imaging, James observes 3 more tactical teams attempting to blank his position, their movement suggesting preparation for a major assault. "Sarah," he signals through the secure channel, "implement protocol unity." Throughout the valley, a coordinated demonstration of community strength begins. Local businesses reopen their doors not in surrender, but in defiance. Farmers return to their fields, ranchers tend their cattle, all under the protection of operators who have chosen to stand with them. The message becomes clear. This community will not be intimidated into submission. "Your reputation is already compromised," Ramirez warns the board members, his tactical assessment cutting through their corporate mindset. "Every minute we maintain this operation damages Azteca's position further. Our contracts, our government, connections, our entire operational model, it's all at risk." James watches through his monitors as this realization transforms the power dynamics. The board members, accustomed to wielding authority through financial and political leverage, now face a situation where those very tools become liabilities. Their presence, meant to demonstrate strength, instead validates every accusation against their organization. Rex and Delta adjust their patrol patterns in response to the increasing threat, their military training allowing them to maintain optimal, defensive coverage while appearing as ordinary farm dogs. Each shepherd's specialized capabilities come into play. Rex's expertise in direct action, Delta's mastery of tactical support, all coordinated through years of combat experience. "This goes beyond Project Eclipse now," Sarah observes through the secure channel. "Your K9 unit created a way to expose not just individual corruption, but entire systems of exploitation. They showed that when people stand together, even the most powerful organizations can be held accountable. Through his surveillance network, James observes urgent communications between the board members and their international offices. Financial. Markets have begun responding to the leaked evidence, with major institutional investors demanding explanations for Azteca's exposed activities. Government contracting offices suspend pending agreements. Military oversight committees initiate emergency reviews of existing security arrangements. Your organization is experiencing what my K9 unit called cascading transparency, James explains, watching their attempts at damage control falter. Each piece of evidence triggers investigations that reveal more connections, more corruption, more compromised officials. They understood that sometimes the most effective way to dismantle corrupt power isn't through direct confrontation, but by letting truth create its own momentum. His enhanced surveillance network captures the psychological impact on Ramirez's remaining loyal operators as they witness their leaders' increasing desperation. These hardened professionals, trained to maintain discipline under extreme conditions, now watch their command structure disintegrate in real time. Sarah, James signals through the secure channel. Activate Legacy Protocol. Throughout the valley, a new phase of community response begins. Local veterans who had initially stepped forward to support their former comrades now share deeper testimony. They describe how military working dogs had helped them rebuild their lives after service, not just through practical assistance, but by showing them how to use their skills to strengthen their community. Your dog's idealism is destroying billions in corporate value, one board member protests. Financial concerns overwhelming tactical considerations. Years of carefully cultivated military contracts, security arrangements, international agreements, all at risk because they couldn't accept operational necessity. My K9 unit understood necessity better than you think, James responds, initiating another system they had prepared. They saw how organizations like Azteca exploit that concept, using it to justify actions that betray everything the military is meant to protect. But they also recognize something more important. That true strength isn't built on compromise or corruption, but on unwavering commitment to principle. His tactical displays show Ramirez's growing comprehension as he observes the situation's inevitable progression. This isn't just about exposing criminal activities, he realizes. Your dog's designed a way to reveal the fundamental contradiction in privatizing military power, how it turns warrior values into corporate assets, transforms service into profit opportunity. Through his command center, James activates another layer of his K9 unit's strategy. Documentation begins flowing to regulatory agencies and oversight committees, revealing how Azteca systematically identified vulnerable veteran communities, used financial pressure and intimidation to acquire strategic properties, then exploited military connections to establish illegal operations. You've created an impossible situation, Ramirez acknowledges, watching his superior's authority continue to erode. Every attempt to contain this exposure only validates the evidence. Every corporate response reveals more connections requiring investigation. It's a self-reinforcing cycle of accountability. Shadow's ears suddenly prick forward, detecting new movement patterns that suggest a shift in enemy tactics. Through his surveillance network, James observes Azteca's tactical teams repositioning for what appears to be a desperate assault attempt. but the growing hesitation in their movements suggests internal conflict as more operators question the legitimacy of their mission. Your choice becomes clearer every moment, James broadcasts to all channels. Continue trying to contain this exposure, watching your organization's authority erode with each attempt, or accept accountability. Acknowledge the truth, my K9 unit died protecting and helped transform this industry's relationship with the warriors it employs. The morning sun breaks through dissipating storm clouds as his surveillance systems detect a fundamental shift in the operational dynamics. Through his command center's monitors, he observes the Azteca board members engaging in intense discussions, their body language suggesting internal conflict between corporate preservation and personal accountability. The sophisticated communications, equipment in their armored vehicles designed for issuing commands, now carries discussions of damage control and negotiated surrender. James's enhanced surveillance systems, carefully positioned years ago, intercept fragments of their increasingly desperate exchanges, plans for media manipulation, attempts to pressure regulatory agencies, calls to political connections, all rendered ineffective by the sheer volume of evidence now flowing through channels they cannot control. Through his surveillance system, James observes significant movement at the eastern perimeter as Azteca's tactical teams begin a coordinated advance. Shadow, Rex, and Delta adjust their positions with practiced precision, their military training allowing them to process multiple threat indicators while maintaining their farm dog appearance. Each shepherd's specialized capabilities come into play, creating an integrated defense network invisible to the approaching forces. Your position is untenable, James broadcasts, his voice carrying quiet authority. Every minute brings new responses from regulatory agencies, military oversight, committees, and international authorities. My K9 unit didn't just expose corruption, they created a mechanism for accountability that grows stronger with each attempt to resist it. His tactical displays show Ramirez's growing acceptance as he observes the inevitable progression of events. The professional military commander in him recognizes when a position becomes strategically indefensible. Through his enhanced surveillance network, he watches him approach the board members, his bearing suggesting preparation for difficult truths. We've lost operational integrity, Ramirez reports, military precision cutting through corporate evasion. Their K9 unit's defensive strategy wasn't just about protecting one community or exposing one organization. They created a template for systemic change that's already spreading beyond our control. James accesses another section of his files, finding detailed analyses of how institutional transformation occurs. His dogs had understood that lasting change requires more than exposing corruption. It needs a path forward for those willing to choose differently. Sarah, he signals through the secure channel, implement redemption directive. Throughout the valley, a coordinated demonstration of community resilience unfolds. Local businesses previously threatened by Azteca now offer support to operators who choose accountability. Veterans who stood against intimidation now extend understanding to former adversaries willing to help expose corruption. The message becomes clear. Principle matters more than past actions. Your K9 unit's legacy is spreading beyond this valley, Ramirez acknowledges, watching more operators step away from their positions. Military contractors worldwide face increased scrutiny. Private security firms confront demands for transparency. the entire industry faces a reckoning with its relationship to warrior values. Through his command center, James activates another system his dogs had prepared, one designed not for combat but for transformation. Documentation begins flowing through international channels, revealing not just criminal activities, but also pathways for reform. Evidence of corruption comes paired with examples of ethical security operations, showing how military expertise can serve communities without compromising principles. My K9 unit understood something fundamental about warriors, James explains, observing the impact of this dual approach. Their strongest loyalty isn't to organizations or contracts, but to the principles that first inspired their service. When you remind them of that original purpose, give them a way to reclaim it, transformation becomes possible. Shadow suddenly alerts to movement along the southern perimeter, his body language signaling detection of new threats while maintaining his deceptively casual posture. Through thermal imaging, James observes several of Ramirez's operators breaking formation, their movements suggesting internal conflict rather than tactical coordination. These hardened professionals, trained in tactical efficiency, now consider strategic ethics. Team leaders who maintain discipline through authority now lead discussions about moral courage. The defense his K9 unit designed proves more powerful than any weapon because it offers redemption along with accountability. You've created something remarkable, Sarah observes through the secure channel. Your dogs didn't just prepare us to resist corruption. They showed how communities can help warriors remember their true purpose, how accountability can lead to renewal rather than just punishment. James's monitors show the board members reaching their inevitable decision as corporate leadership confronts military reality. Their sophisticated equipment, their tactical advantages, their financial resources, all prove ineffective against the simple power of truth aligned with principle. We're prepared to discuss terms, one board member announces, corporate authority giving way to personal responsibility. But you should understand this goes beyond our organization. The changes your K9 unit initiated will affect the entire private military sector. They understood that too, James responds, activating the final phase of his dog's strategy. They believe that true security isn't built on profit or power, but on communities and warriors working together to protect what matters. Everything they prepared here, every system they designed, was meant to show that another way is possible. Through his surveillance feeds, he watches Ramirez's technically advanced teams encounter increasing difficulty. Their sophisticated equipment, designed for conventional security operations, proves less effective against a defense network built around K9 combat tactics. Each time they adjust their approach, the shepherds modify their patrol patterns, maintaining optimal coverage while appearing to simply guard their territory. Rex and Delta coordinate their movements with practiced efficiency. Their military training allowing them to process the escalating threat while appearing as simple farm dogs. But James notes the subtle changes in their posture, the way they adjust their positions to maintain optimal defensive coverage of new threat locations. Your dog's vision extends far beyond this valley now. Ramirez approaches, his military bearing softened by newfound understanding. Federal task forces are moving on similar operations in 3 other states. Private military companies worldwide face increased scrutiny. The entire industry confronts questions about its relationship with warrior values. James accesses the final section of his files, finding his K9 unit's vision for lasting change. They believed transformation was possible, he responds, studying their carefully prepared plans, not just of organizations or industries, but of how society views the relationship between military service and community protection. His tactical displays show the broader impact already spreading. News networks broadcast footage of the valley's resistance. Military oversight committees initiate comprehensive reviews of private security contracts. Veteran communities across the country begin implementing similar protective measures, guided by his K9 unit's documented strategies. Sarah, James signals through the secure channel, activate the final protocol. Throughout the valley, his dog's ultimate preparation reveals itself, not in weapons or tactics, but in the emergence of a new model of community security. Local veterans who stood against corruption now establish training programs, teaching others how to protect their communities through principle rather than force. Former operators who chose accountability begin sharing insights about transforming military skills into tools for building rather than intimidation. Project Eclipse was never just about advanced technology, James explains, watching understanding dawn in Ramirez's expression. My K9 unit saw it as a symbol of how military capabilities can be twisted against the very communities they're meant to protect. But they also recognized an opportunity to demonstrate something more powerful. Through his surveillance network, he observes the final stages of Azteca's withdrawal. Their sophisticated equipment, their tactical advantages, their corporate resources, all proved ineffective against the simple power of a community united. In defending what matters, the defense his dogs designed succeeded not through superior force, but through awakening the conscience that power had suppressed. You've created something remarkable, Sarah observes through the secure channel. Your K9 unit didn't just prepare us to resist corruption. They showed how communities and warriors can work together to build something better than what they're fighting against. James activates the last system his dogs had prepared, one designed not for conflict, but for legacy. Throughout the valley, secure networks begin sharing documented strategies for community protection, training programs, teaching the integration of military expertise with civilian needs, frameworks for maintaining security through principle, rather than intimidation. Your dog's vision goes beyond exposing corruption, Ramirez acknowledges, watching the transformation continue. They created a template for redefining the relationship between military service and community well-being, a way to honor warrior values while protecting against their exploitation. Through his command center, James monitors the broader impact as his K9 unit's influence spreads. Veteran organizations nationwide begin adopting similar protective strategies. Military contractors face demands for ethical accountability. Communities discover the power of standing together against intimidation. The defense they designed proves more powerful than any weapon because it offers a path toward lasting change. The morning light bathes Sierra Vista Valley in golden hues as James stands on his farmhouse porch, observing the profound transformation unfolding across the community. His surveillance systems track the systematic withdrawal of Azteca forces as the board members implement their negotiated surrender. Through his command center's monitors, he watches professional operators laying down weapons not in defeat, but in recognition of a deeper victory. The triumph of principle over power. Shadow, Rex, and Delta maintain their defensive positions, their military training allowing them to process the changing tactical situation while appearing as ordinary farm dogs. Through their sophisticated patrol patterns, they continue monitoring the departing forces, ensuring the withdrawal proceeds as agreed. Your K9 unit's legacy extends far beyond this valley now. Ramirez approaches, his military bearing softened by newfound understanding. Federal task forces are moving on similar operations in 3 states. Private military companies worldwide face increased scrutiny. The entire industry confronts questions about its relationship with warrior values. James accesses the final section of his tactical files, finding his dog's vision for lasting change. They believe transformation was possible, he responds, studying their carefully prepared plans, not just of organizations or industries, but of how society views the relationship between military service and community protection. His tactical displays show the broader impact already spreading across the country. News networks broadcast footage of the valley's resistance. Military oversight committees initiate comprehensive reviews of private security contracts. Veteran communities begin implementing similar protective measures guided by his K9 units. Documented strategies. Sarah, James signals through the secure channel, activate final protocol. Throughout the valley, his dog's ultimate preparation reveals itself, not in weapons or tactics, but in the emergence of a new model of community. Security. Local veterans who stood against corruption now establish training programs, teaching others how to protect their communities through principle rather than force. Through his surveillance network, he observes the final stages of Azteca's withdrawal, their sophisticated equipment and tactical advantages proving ineffective against the simple power of a community united in defending what matters. The defense his dogs designed succeeded not through superior force, but through awakening the conscience that power had suppressed. You've created something remarkable, Sarah observes through the secure channel. Your K9 unit didn't just prepare us to resist corruption. They showed how communities and warriors can work together to build something better than what they're fighting against. James activates the last system his dogs had prepared, one designed not for conflict, but for legacy. Throughout the valley, secure networks begin sharing documented strategies for community protection, training programs, teaching the integration of military expertise with civilian needs, frameworks for maintaining security through principle rather than intimidation. Inside his command center, James reviews the final tactical readouts as Shadow alerts to movement near the perimeter. A group of former Azteca operators approaches, their weapons surrendered, seeking to join the community's transformation. Each shepherd's specialized training allows them to assess the genuine nature of this change while maintaining defensive readiness. Your dogs understood something fundamental about service, one former operator speaks, his voice carrying the weight of rediscovered purpose. It was never about the technology or tactical advantage. It was about protecting what matters, about standing together against those who would threaten our communities. Through his monitors, James observes more veterans arriving from neighboring towns, drawn by news of the valley's successful resistance. Each brings unique skills and experiences, ready to contribute to the new security model his K9 unit had envisioned, one based on community cooperation rather than corporate power. Sarah's voice comes through the secure channel. The Federal Task Force reports similar transformations beginning in other regions. Former private military contractors are reaching out, seeking guidance on ethical reform. Your dog's influence spreads further each day. Rex and Delta maintain their patrol patterns, their military training now focused on integrating new community members while ensuring security. Their specialized capabilities prove invaluable in demonstrating how military expertise can serve protection rather than intimidation. Project Eclipse was never the real threat, James explains to a gathering of community leaders. It was just a symbol of how military power can be corrupted, turned against the very people it should protect. My K9 unit saw beyond that, showing us how true security comes from unity and principle. Through his surveillance network, he watches the valley's transformation continue. Farms once threatened by corporate takeover now serve as training grounds for ethical security practices. Veterans who faced intimidation now lead programs teaching communities how to stand together against corruption. The most remarkable change isn't in our systems, Sarah notes, gesturing toward where former Azteca operators now work alongside local farmers. It's in how people view their relationship with protection. They understand now that true security comes from community and principle, not just tactical advantage. James studies the latest implementation reports, showing how his K9 unit's model continues to spread. Communities facing similar threats reach out for guidance in establishing their own protective networks. Military contractors seek certification in ethical security practices. The defense they designed proves more powerful than any weapon because it offers a template for lasting change. Shadow suddenly alerts to approaching vehicles, but his body language signals recognition rather than threat. Through his spotting scope, James observes military officials arriving to study the valley's transformation. His dog's impact has drawn attention from those seeking to reform private security operations nationwide. Your K9 unit's legacy grows stronger every day, Ramirez observes, arriving for his regular advisory session with new community protection teams. The former Azteca commander now helps other military professionals transition their skills toward ethical security work. Each community that adopts these principles creates ripples that influence others. Through the center's global monitoring network, James observes these ripples in action. International security firms face increased demands for transparency. Private military companies confront pressure to demonstrate ethical accountability. The transformation his dogs initiated continues to reshape how society views the relationship between military power and community protection. We're seeing something remarkable, Sarah adds, reviewing reports from partner communities. Former adversaries working together to build something better than what they fought against. Veterans finding new purpose in strengthening rather than intimidating communities, discovering that unity and principle create stronger defense than any weapon. James activates the center's main display, showing real-time data from protective initiatives worldwide. Each point of light represents a community implementing his K9 unit strategies, creating networks of mutual support rather than isolation. The defense they designed proves more powerful than any tactical advantage because it grows stronger with each new connection. My dogs understood something fundamental about protection, James explains to a gathering of new trainees. That true security isn't built through force or fear, but through communities working together, through warriors remembering their highest purpose, through people choosing to stand for what's right regardless of the cost. As evening approaches, James reviews the day's training recordings, noting how each session emphasizes the principles that guided his K9 unit's preparations. The sophisticated equipment they used, the tactical advantages they created, the strategic positions they secured, all now serve to teach others how military expertise can protect rather than threaten. The work continues, Sarah observes, joining James in the observation room. There will always be those who try to use power for corruption, who attempt to turn military strength against civilian communities. James nods, watching Rex and Delta guide new K9 teams through advanced protection protocols. Yes, but my dogs gave us something more valuable than perfect security. They showed that when communities stand together, when warriors remember their true calling, when people choose principle over power, transformation becomes possible. The evening sun casts long shadows across Sierra Vista Valley, illuminating a community forever changed by one K9 unit's vision. Not just as a place that resisted corruption, but as a model for how military strength can serve rather than dominate. How warrior values can protect rather than intimidate. How principle can transform power into protection. James Reeves's military working dog's ultimate legacy proves to be not in the battles they fought, but in showing how courage and conviction can build something stronger than any weapon. A future where communities and warriors work together to protect what matters most. Through the surveillance monitors, James watches a critical shift in the tactical situation as Azteca's remaining forces prepare for what appears to be their final, desperate assault. Shadow's ears prick forward, detecting changes in movement patterns that suggest coordinated attack preparation, while Rex and Delta adjust their positions with practiced military precision. "Your K9 unit has forced our hand," Ramirez announces. Through the tactical network, his voice carrying the weight of someone about to commit to irreversible action. "If we can't secure Project Eclipse through negotiation, we'll take it by force. Your dogs may be well trained, but they're still just animals against superior numbers." James observes multiple tactical teams moving into assault positions, their deployment suggesting a three-pronged attack designed to overwhelm his defenses. Through his thermal imaging, he spots specialized equipment being unpacked, the kind of advanced tactical gear designed to counter military working dogs. "Sarah," he signals through the secure channel, "initiate Combat Protocol Alpha." Throughout the valley, a coordinated defensive response begins. The community's preparation, guided by years of K9 tactical training, shifts from passive resistance to active defense. Shadow suddenly tenses, his body language signaling imminent threat while maintaining his farm dog appearance. Through his surveillance network, James watches Azteca's technical teams activate what appears to be sonic weaponry, equipment specifically designed to incapacitate working dogs through targeted frequency attacks. "You still don't understand what makes military K9s different," James broadcasts, activating countermeasures his dogs had helped design. Hidden speakers throughout the property begin emitting specific frequencies that neutralize the sonic attacks. It's not just about training or capability, it's about adaptation, about turning enemy tactics into advantages. The first wave of Azteca's assault begins, tactical teams moving with professional precision toward predetermined objectives. But as they advance, they encounter a defense system unlike anything their military training prepared them for. Shadow, Rex, and Delta implement years of specialized combat protocols. their movements appearing random to untrained observers while actually executing complex tactical patterns. Impossible, one of Ramirez's team leaders reports over their compromised channel. The dogs are countering our advanced tactics. They're not just reacting, they're anticipating our movements. James allows himself a grim smile, remembering countless hours of combat training. Through his command center's monitors, he watches his K9 unit's preparation pay off. Each shepherd's specialized capabilities come into play. Shadow's unmatched threat detection, allowing him to alert to hidden attackers. Rex's direct action expertise, disrupting assault teams' coordination. Delta's stealth and tactical support, creating confusion in enemy ranks. You trained them well, Ramirez acknowledges, watching his carefully planned operation encounter increasing difficulty. But we still have superior numbers, advanced technology, and corporate backing. How long can 3 dogs hold against professional military force? James activates another layer of his K9 unit's defense strategy. Throughout the property, hidden systems designed specifically for K9 combat support come online. Thermal imaging shows Azteca's forces encountering carefully prepared obstacles, their tactical advantage diminishing against defenses they can't easily counter. It was never about just 3 dogs, James responds, watching the community's coordinated response unfold. My K9 unit showed us that true strength isn't in superior numbers or technology. It's in understanding that every apparent weakness can become an advantage if you prepare properly. Shadow suddenly alerts to movement along the eastern perimeter, his body language signaling a new threat pattern. Through his surveillance network, James observes Azteca's elite teams deploying what appears to be their final contingency. Specialized capture units trained specifically for military working dog neutralization. Sarah, he signals through the secure channel, status report on community position. Her response comes immediately. Everyone's in place. The valley's ready for your K9 unit's signal. James nods, watching his dogs maintain their defensive positions while processing multiple threat indicators. Final warning, Reeves, Ramirez announces, his tactical teams moving into final assault positions. Surrender Project Eclipse and your dogs, or we demonstrate exactly what happens when military training meets corporate resources. How many casualties are you willing to accept for your principles? James's response carries the quiet confidence of someone who has prepared for exactly this moment. That's the difference between us, Ramirez. My K9 unit understood that sometimes the greatest victory isn't in overwhelming force, but in showing others a better way to fight. With precise keystrokes, he initiates the final phase of his dog's defense protocol. Throughout the valley, a coordinated sequence begins. Local veterans who received specialized training move into support positions. Farmers who learn tactical basics establish secondary defensive lines. The entire community implements protection strategies developed through years of K9 guided preparation. Shadow, Rex, and Delta shift into full combat mode, their farm dog. Appearance giving way to the precise military bearing that marked them as elite working dogs. Each shepherd's movements become sharper, more focused, their specialized training now fully evident as they coordinate the valley's defense. They're not just fighting, Sarah observes through the secure channel, watching the K9 unit's influence spread across the tactical situation. They're showing everyone how military expertise can protect rather than threaten, how training can serve community rather than power. Azteca's forces encounter increasing resistance as they attempt to press their assault. Their sophisticated equipment proves less effective against defenses designed specifically for K9 combat support. Their tactical advantages diminish against a community prepared through years of K9 guided training. Through his surveillance network, James watches his dog's impact on the unfolding battle. Shadow's threat detection capabilities allow defensive teams to anticipate and counter enemy movements. Rex's direct action expertise disrupts assault team coordination. Delta's tactical support creates continuous advantages for community defenders. Your K9 unit has turned the entire valley into a defensive weapon, Ramirez realizes, watching his carefully planned operation continue to unravel. Every farmer, every veteran, every community member operating as part of a coordinated response guided by military working dog protocols. James activates another system his dogs had helped prepare, one designed to demonstrate the true power of their preparation. Throughout the property, hidden cameras begin broadcasting the assault to multiple media outlets, showing in real time how corporate military force fails against community unity guided by principle rather than profit. Consider what happens next, he broadcasts to all channels. Every action your forces take shows the world what happens when private military power threatens civilian communities. But it also shows something more important, how communities can stand together against corruption when they're properly prepared. Shadow suddenly alerts to movement near the command center, his body language signaling detection of infiltration teams. Through his thermal imaging, James watches specialized units attempting to breach his defensive perimeter, their movements suggesting extensive military training in covert operations. But his K9 unit had prepared for this too. Rex and Delta adjust their positions with practiced precision, implementing advanced combat protocols designed specifically for close-quarter defense. Their military training allows them to process multiple threats while maintaining tactical advantage. Impossible, one of Azteca's team leaders reports, watching their elite units encounter increasing difficulty. These aren't just trained dogs. They're implementing advanced military tactics we've never seen before. They're not just reacting to our movements. They're controlling the entire battle space. James monitors the situation through his tactical displays, watching his dog's preparation continue to pay off. Each shepherd's specialized capabilities work in perfect coordination, their years of training creating a defense system that grows stronger with every enemy attempt to overcome it. Your K9 unit hasn't just prepared a defense, Ramirez acknowledges, observing his forces mounting frustration. They've created a new kind of warfare, one where community unity guided by principle proves stronger than corporate power backed by superior force. Through his command center, James implements the final phase of his dog's combat strategy. Throughout the valley, hidden systems activate in precise sequence, each one designed to demonstrate how military expertise can serve protection rather than intimidation. The entire community becomes part of a coordinated response that proves more powerful than any corporate tactical advantage. The late afternoon sun bathes Sierra Vista Valley as Azteca's forces begin their final withdrawal. James stands on his farmhouse porch, Shadow, Rex, and Delta maintaining their vigilant positions as the last corporate vehicles disappear into the distance. Their apparent defeat carries deeper implications, not just the failure of superior force against prepared resistance, but the transformation of how military power can serve rather than threaten communities. Your K9 unit changed more than just this valley, Ramirez acknowledges before departing, his military bearing now carrying newfound respect. They showed us all a different path, one where our skills protect rather than intimidate. This story will spread far beyond Sierra Vista. Through his surveillance network, James observes the community emerging stronger from the confrontation. Farmers return to their fields not in fear, but with renewed purpose. Veterans who stood together against corruption now lead programs teaching others how to protect what matters through principle rather than force. The real victory isn't in defeating Azteca, Sarah observes, watching former operators now working alongside local residents. It's in showing everyone that true security comes from unity and principle, not superior firepower or advanced technology. As evening approaches, James reviews the day's events from his command center. His 3 shepherds maintain their patrol patterns, their military training now focused on protecting a community transformed by their influence. Project Eclipse, the technology that sparked this confrontation, proves less powerful than the lessons his K9 unit taught about standing together against corruption. Your dogs gave us something more valuable than any weapon, a gathered crowd of community members tells James. They showed us that when people choose to stand together, when warriors remember their true purpose, no amount of corporate power can overcome the strength of united communities protecting what matters most. The setting sun casts long shadows across Sierra Vista Valley, illuminating not just a place that resisted corruption, but a model for how military strength can serve rather than dominate, how warrior values can protect rather than intimidate, how principle can transform power into protection. James Reeves's military working dog's ultimate legacy proves to be not in the battles they fought, but in showing how courage and conviction can build something stronger than any weapon, a future where communities and warriors work together to protect what matters most. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time and effort. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to subscribe to our channel. It really means a lot to us. Your support helps us continue creating more engaging content like this, exploring themes of courage, community, and standing up for what's right. Hit that notification bell too, so you don't miss any of our future stories. And if this resonated with you, check out our other videos about ordinary heroes doing extraordinary things. Stay tuned for more incredible stories coming your way tomorrow.